Every legend hides a truth. Every myth whispers a warning. Welcome to the Mythic Hour, where the forgotten gods and cursed stories return to life. Before there was land or sky, before men spoke or gods quarreled, there was only the endless dark waters, a void where silence dwelled. From this primeval sea rose the first dual gods, Ometeotl, the god of duality, the father and mother of creation. Ometeotl bore 4 sons, each destined to shape the cosmos in their own way. The first was Zyptotec, the god of renewal, clad in the flayed skin of sacrifice. The second was Huitzilopochtli, the fierce god of war. The third was Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, god of night and sorcery. And the fourth was Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, lord of wind, wisdom, and light. Quetzalcoatl was unlike his brothers. Where Tezcatlipoca carried obsidian mirrors of darkness, Quetzalcoatl carried the breath of life itself. His body glistened with emerald scales that shimmered like the feathers of the resplendent Quetzal bird. His eyes burned with the light of Venus, the morning star. To the mortals yet unborn, he would be the bringer of corn, of law, of knowledge, and of hope. But creation was never simple. When the gods looked upon the void, they knew it must be ordered. Together, Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca descended into the watery chaos and found the monstrous Cipactli, the crocodilian beast of endless hunger. From her body, they would forge the world. The two brothers battled Cipactli, who devoured her own flesh as fast as it was torn away. Tezcatlipoca sacrificed his own foot, casting it into her maw so that she would be distracted. In that moment, Quetzalcoatl struck with the force of the winds, tearing the monster apart. Her body became the earth, her hair became the trees and flowers, her eyes became the caves and wells, her back the mountains, and her skin the fertile soil. Thus the world was born, though Tezcatlipoca limped forever after, his missing foot a mark of the sacrifice he made. The gods looked upon their work, and they knew it was good. Yet the world was still empty. There was no sun to light it, no moon to soften the night. And so, in the heavens above, the gods gathered in Teotihuacan, the place where gods are made. It was here that Quetzalcoatl's nature revealed itself most clearly. While Tezcatlipoca sought dominion through strength and fear, Quetzalcoatl sought balance, order, and life. To him, power was not to be hoarded but to be given. When the gods asked, "Who will sacrifice himself to become the sun?" none dared to step forward. The fire roared in the sacred hearth, and its flames demanded the life of a god. Finally, 2 deities stepped forth, proud Tezcatlipoca, who adorned himself in rich feathers and gold, and humble Nanohuatzin, a pockmarked and diseased god with nothing to boast. When the moment came, Tezcatlipoca hesitated, afraid to cast himself into the fire. But Nanohuatzin, in his humility, leapt without fear. He was consumed, and from the flames rose the blazing sun. Ashamed, Tezcatlipoca followed, becoming a second sun. But the heavens could not hold 2. To resolve this, Quetzalcoatl struck Tezcatlipoca with a rabbit, dimming his light forever and casting him to the night sky as the moon. Thus, the heavens were balanced, sun and moon, day and night. Still, the world lacked its true inhabitants. The gods had created the sun, the moon, the stars, the waters, the mountains, but no humans to walk upon the earth. It was here that Quetzalcoatl's greatest journey would begin, a descent into the underworld itself to bring forth life for mankind. When the sun rose for the first time in the 5th age, its golden light swept across the mountains, rivers, and valleys. Yet the land was barren of voices. No footsteps stirred the soil, no laughter echoed in the canyons. The gods knew that a world without people was incomplete. But where could they find the essence to shape mankind? The answer lay in the bones of those who had lived before. For the Aztecs taught that the world was not the first but the 5th. 4 ages had come before, each destroyed by catastrophe. The bones of those long-dead races lay buried deep in Mictlan, the land of the dead, guarded by Mictlantecutli, the skeletal lord of death, and his consort Mictequecihuatl. Quetzalcoatl, moved by compassion, declared, "I will go to Mictlan. I will bring forth the bones of those who came before, so that mankind may live again." His brother Tezcatlipoca laughed. the sound echoing like obsidian scraping stone. "You are bold, feathered serpent. Do you think the Lord of Death will give you his treasures freely?" Quetzalcoatl did not answer. He knew what must be done. With his twin aspect, Xochitl, the dog-headed god of lightning and death, Quetzalcoatl descended into the 9 layers of the underworld. Each layer brought new trials, mountains crashing together to crush intruders, obsidian winds that cut flesh from bone, jaguars prowling in the eternal dark. But Quetzalcoatl pressed on, guided by his breath, the life-giving wind, and Xochitl's loyal torchlight. At last they reached Mictlantecuhtli's throne. The skeletal lord rose, his empty eye sockets glowing with deathly fire. His voice rattled like 1,000 bones. "Why do you come here, feathered serpent?" Quetzalcoatl bowed but stood tall. "I seek the bones of the ancients, that I may breathe new life into the world." Mictlantecuhtli's jaw clattered with cruel laughter. "You dare take from me? Very well, if you desire them, prove your worth. Take this shell and sound it as a trumpet through my halls. Only then may you earn what you seek." The god of death handed Quetzalcoatl a shell. But the shell was solid, without holes, impossible to blow. Quetzalcoatl examined it and, smiling with cunning, called upon the worms of the earth. They burrowed holes through the shell. Then bees, summoned by the god, crawled inside, their buzzing creating a strange and haunting music. Quetzalcoatl lifted it to his lips and blew. The sound echoed through Mictlan like thunder, stirring even the bones of the dead. For a moment, Mictlantecuhtli was silent. But then his hollow voice grew dark. "Take them then if you dare." Quetzalcoatl gathered the bones of men and women, tying them carefully in a bundle. He turned to leave, but Mictlantecuhtli had no intention of letting him escape so easily. The Lord of Death set a trap, a deep pit dug in the path. As Quetzalcoatl fled with his bundle, the earth shook, and he stumbled. He fell into the pit, the bones scattering and shattering into fragments. Xochitl rushed to his side, helping him gather what remained. Quetzalcoatl wept, thinking his mission had failed. But then he remembered, even broken bones hold power, for from them, life could still be renewed. He carried the fragments back to the earth above, where the goddess Xuacotl, the serpent woman, awaited him. Together, they ground the bones into a fine flour. Quetzalcoatl cut his own flesh, letting his divine blood mix with the powder. From this sacred mixture, mankind was born anew. Thus men and women rose again upon the 5th sun, children of bone and blood, fragile yet enduring. They were not as tall or as strong as those who came before, for the bones had been broken in the fall. Yet they carried within them the resilience of Quetzalcoatl's sacrifice. But humanity could not live on blood and bone alone. They needed sustenance. And so Quetzalcoatl once again sought a gift for them. High in the mountains, deep within the earth, the kernels of maize were hidden. The other gods had tried to retrieve them, but the mountains guarded their treasure fiercely. Only Quetzalcoatl, with his breath of wind, could part the stones. He transformed into a black ant and crept into the mountain's cracks, carrying a single kernel of corn back to mankind. This was the seed of life. From maize would come nourishment, strength, and civilization. And so, Quetzalcoatl became not only the creator of humanity but their benefactor, the one who gave them food, knowledge, and law. Where Tezcatlipoca ruled through fear and night, Quetzalcoatl ruled through wisdom and light. Yet in the halls of the gods, shadows were never far behind. Tezcatlipoca, his brother and rival, looked upon humanity with contempt. He whispered, "They are weak. They are fragile. They should serve us, not flourish." Thus began the eternal struggle between the feathered serpent and the smoking mirror, a rivalry that would shape the fate of gods and men alike. For a time, the world prospered. Humanity tilled the earth, planting the maize Quetzalcoatl had brought them. They prayed at the temples and honored the gods, though most especially the feathered serpent, who had given them life itself. Quetzalcoatl, though divine, walked among his people in the city of Talon, teaching them the arts of weaving, the calendar, astronomy, and the laws of justice. He despised needless sacrifice. Where other gods demanded the spilling of human hearts, Quetzalcoatl offered flowers, butterflies, and the song of birds. The people loved him for this mercy. But such love brought envy. High in the obsidian skies, Tezcatlipoca watched. His body shimmered like polished black stone, his eyes glowed with cold fire, and from his smoking mirror he peered into the hearts of men. He saw the way they honored Quetzalcoatl above all others, and his pride festered. "Brother," he whispered into the void, "you shine too brightly. Let us see how your light endures when I cast shadows upon it." Tezcatlipoca descended to Talon, cloaked in smoke and trickery. He did not confront Quetzalcoatl openly. Instead, he sowed whispers among the people. "The feathered serpent is too proud. He claims to love you, but does he not make himself lord over you? Without blood, how can the sun rise? Without sacrifice, how long will the world endure?" Slowly, doubt crept into human hearts. But deception alone was not enough for Tezcatlipoca. He wanted Quetzalcoatl undone, humiliated, cast down from the height of his glory. And so he devised a cruel trick. One night, Tezcatlipoca appeared in Talon disguised as an old man. He carried with him a cup filled with pulque, the fermented juice of the maguey plant. He told the priests of Quetzalcoatl, "Take this to your lord. It is the drink of the gods, a gift that will bring him wisdom and joy." When Quetzalcoatl received the cup, he was hesitant. He, who had always sought purity and balance, rarely partook in such indulgence. But Tezcatlipoca, still in disguise, urged him on, "Drink, noble lord. One who denies such a gift denies the gods themselves." Quetzalcoatl drank. The pulque was sweet, yet it burned like fire. It clouded his mind, softened his resolve. Tezcatlipoca gave him more, and soon the feathered serpent stumbled, his vision swimming, his thoughts a haze. In this state, Quetzalcoatl was led astray. The smoking mirror placed before him a polished surface, and in it Quetzalcoatl saw not his radiant feathers and shining scales, but a withered, aging man. His heart was pierced with shame and despair. That night, in his drunkenness, Quetzalcoatl broke his vows of purity. He fell into disgrace, some say by lying with a priestess, others say merely by succumbing to weakness. But whatever the truth, when dawn came, the great feathered serpent was filled with sorrow. The people of Talon looked upon their god with confusion and dismay. They who had trusted in his wisdom now saw him stumble, broken by the very vices he had forbidden. Tezcatlipoca revealed himself, laughing in triumph. "Behold your lord, the one who claimed to be above sacrifice and weakness. He is no different than you." Ashamed, Quetzalcoatl knew he could not remain. He called his followers together and told them, "My time among you is over. I must go where the winds lead me." Some say he built a great raft of serpents and sailed eastward across the sea, his body glowing with fire. Others say he set himself aflame, and from the ashes his spirit rose into the sky as the morning star, Venus. Still others whisper that he journeyed to the east, vowing to return one day in glory. Whatever the truth, Talon was left desolate. Without Quetzalcoatl's guidance, his people fell into strife, their city crumbling into ruin. But even in defeat, Quetzalcoatl's story did not end. For the struggle between him and Tezcatlipoca was eternal, light against shadow, mercy against cruelty, wisdom against trickery. When Quetzalcoatl became the morning star, Tezcatlipoca claimed the night as his realm, a mirror to his brother's brilliance. Every dawn, as Venus rises before the sun, it is Quetzalcoatl reminding the world that he has not vanished, that light must always come before darkness. And yet, the Aztecs remembered both gods. For they knew that creation required balance, life and death, day and night, Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca. One could not exist without the other. Among the priests, a prophecy took root. It was said that one day, in the year Suacatl, one reed, Quetzalcoatl would return from the east to reclaim his place. When the Spaniards arrived centuries later, many believed Hernán Cortés was the returning feathered serpent, though this was a tragic misunderstanding that sealed the fate of the Aztec Empire. But in the ancient stories, Quetzalcoatl's promise remained. He was not destroyed, only transformed, waiting for the moment when wisdom and mercy would once again rise to challenge the cruelty of the smoking mirror. Thus the struggle of the gods became the story of mankind, a reminder that even those born of light can fall, and that even in ruin, the promise of return endures. Though Quetzalcoatl vanished from Tallinn in sorrow, his presence did not fade from the memory of mortals. For the Feathered Serpent was more than a single god. He was a principle, a force woven into the very fabric of creation. His gifts to humanity endured, and in every temple, every ritual, his breath of life lingered. Among the Toltecs, Quetzalcoatl was remembered as a king, Tepiltzin-Quetzalcoatl Quetzalcoatl, the priest-ruler of Tallinn. They told how he had reigned in peace, refusing to permit human sacrifice, teaching instead offerings of flowers, incense, and birds. His reign was marked by prosperity, maize grew tall, and the people lived in harmony. Even after his downfall at Tezcatlipoca's hands, the Toltecs believed his spirit lingered, guiding them from afar. They said he crossed the eastern sea on a raft of serpents, vowing one day to return. This memory became a prophecy, the belief that Quetzalcoatl was not gone, only waiting. Among the Maya, he was known as Kukulkan, the serpent of the sky. In Yucatan, they raised pyramids where twice a year, on the equinox, the shadow of the serpent slid down the temple steps at Chichen Itza. To them, Kukulkan was both the winds that carried the rains and the wisdom that guided kings. Among the Aztecs, centuries later, Quetzalcoatl was remembered as the twin of Tezcatlipoca, not always victorious, but always essential. He was the morning star, the bringer of maize, the creator of men. He was both the god of wisdom and the ruler who fell into exile. Thus his story traveled across cultures, sometimes a god, sometimes a man, sometimes both. Always, he was the one who brought knowledge, order, and hope. The Aztec priests said that all the arts of civilization flowed from Quetzalcoatl's hands. It was he who invented writing and books, who taught the keeping of the calendar and the naming of days. He gave humanity jade and turquoise, the crafting of feathers, and the wisdom of the stars. Most sacred of all, he brought maize, the staff of life. Without corn, the people would starve. With it, they thrived. The story of Quetzalcoatl as the ant who carried the first kernel remained one of his most beloved myths, showing that even the mighty feathered serpent could humble himself for the sake of humanity. Unlike Tezcatlipoca, who thrived on sacrifice and terror, Quetzalcoatl sought balance. He demanded not rivers of blood but offerings of gratitude. To him, sacrifice was symbolic, the butterfly freed into the air, the song lifted to the heavens, the flower placed upon the altar. It was said he created the first temples of white stone, where the smoke of copal incense rose like prayers into the wind. In these temples, priests studied the stars, learning when to sow and when to reap, when to celebrate and when to mourn. All this was Quetzalcoatl's wisdom. To the people of the valley, the heavens themselves told Quetzalcoatl's story. Every morning, just before the sun rose, the planet Venus appeared in the east, brilliant, radiant, the morning star. This was Quetzalcoatl, reminding the world that light comes before day. When Venus disappeared from the dawn, they said Quetzalcoatl had gone into the underworld, waging battle against darkness, only to rise again in triumph. At night, Tezcatlipoca ruled with his obsidian stars. But in the morning, Quetzalcoatl's star pierced his brother's darkness, a cosmic rivalry written into the firmament. The cycles of Venus became sacred. Priests tracked its movements, timing rituals to its rising and setting. When Venus vanished for days at a time, they said Quetzalcoatl was dying, only to return in glory. In this way, the heavens mirrored his myth: fall, death, rebirth, an eternal promise. Yet his legacy was not without contradiction. To some, he was the kind king who forbade blood sacrifice, a god of peace and wisdom. To others, he was still a deity who demanded offerings, for no god in Mesoamerica was entirely free of the cycle of blood. The Aztecs reconciled this by saying Quetzalcoatl was dual, just as Ometeotl, the primordial god, was both male and female. Quetzalcoatl was both man and god, both merciful and stern. He had fallen into disgrace, but he had also risen as the morning star. This duality made him relatable, almost human. Unlike the terrible gods who demanded terror, Quetzalcoatl was one who had struggled, erred, and still endured. As the centuries passed, the prophecy of Quetzalcoatl's return grew stronger. Among the Toltecs, the Maya, and later the Aztecs, priests whispered that one day in the year Suacatl, one read his sacred calendar name, he would return from the east, bringing renewal. When Hernán Cortés and the Spaniards arrived in the year Suacatl Tepiltzin 1519, many thought the prophecy was fulfilled. Cortés, with his pale skin, ships like floating temples, and thunderous weapons, was mistaken by some as the long-awaited Feathered Serpent. This tragic belief weakened resistance, allowing conquest to sweep across the valley. The Spaniards crushed the empire, and with it, the temples of the gods. But Quetzalcoatl's myth endured, not destroyed but transformed. For even when his temples fell, the morning star still rose. Unlike other gods who faded into myth, Quetzalcoatl remained. His image as the feathered serpent, body of a snake, plumage of the Quetzal bird, is still carved into stone temples, winding down staircases, coiling around pillars. His wisdom, his fall, his promise of return continue to inspire. For the people of Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl was not simply a god. He was a memory, hope, and identity. He was the breath in the wind, the corn in the field, the star in the morning sky. And though betrayed, though cast down, though misunderstood, he was never erased. Thus Quetzalcoatl's legacy stretched beyond myth into history, beyond worship into prophecy. He was the eternal teacher, the fallen king, the god who promised to return. The wind whispers his name still. Across the valleys of Anahuac, through the ruined temples and silent pyramids, the story of Quetzalcoatl endures, a tale of creation, of fall, and of promise. When Quetzalcoatl departed from Tallinn, his people wept. Some claimed he cast himself upon a pyre, and from the flames his heart rose into the heavens as the morning star. Others swore they saw him on the eastern shore, building a raft of serpents, his cloak of feathers gleaming like emerald fire as he drifted across the sea. Yet all agreed on one thing: he was not gone forever. His exile was not an ending but a passage. He would return. The priests inscribed this prophecy into the calendars. In the sacred year Suacatl, one read, the feathered serpent would come back from the east, bringing renewal to the world of men. For the Aztecs, time was never a straight line. It was a wheel that turned again and again, each age ending only to begin anew. Just as the sun was born and destroyed across the epochs, so too would gods rise and fall, only to rise once more. Quetzalcoatl's myth was a mirror of this cycle. He had descended into Mictlan to bring forth bones and blood, fallen into disgrace at Tallinn, and risen as Venus in the sky. His return was written into the very motions of the heavens. Each time the morning star vanished, it returned brighter than before. To the Aztecs, Venus was both a reminder and a promise. When they gazed eastward at dawn, they did not see only a star. They saw the feathered serpent himself, reborn each morning, herald of the sun, eternal companion of mankind. Centuries later, when strangers came across the sea in great floating temples, clad in iron and bearing thunderous weapons, some priests whispered that the prophecy was fulfilled. The year was Suacatl, the year of one reed, and the leader of the strangers bore pale skin and a beard, features long prophesied in some traditions of Quetzalcoatl's return. Hernán Cortés was no god, but the tragic misunderstanding tilted the balance of the empire. The Aztecs hesitated, unsure if they faced invaders or the returning feathered serpent. In that hesitation, conquest struck like lightning. Temples fell. Idols were broken. The blood of the empire spilled upon the altars of a new age. And yet, even in conquest, Quetzalcoatl did not vanish. He was too deeply woven into the breath of the people, too eternal in the stars above. His temples might be abandoned, his priests silenced, but the morning star still rose. The winds still whispered his name. The story of Quetzalcoatl is not one of simple triumph. He was not a flawless god. He fell, he faltered, he fled in shame. Yet it is precisely this fall that made his story eternal. For the people, he was not only a creator but a mirror of their own lives, fragile, prone to error, yet capable of rising again. In him, They saw mercy, a God who offered flowers instead of hearts, songs instead of blood. In him, they saw wisdom, the teacher who gave them maize, books, calendars, and law. And in him, they saw promise, the assurance that even in ruin, renewal would come. Tezcatlipoca, his rival, was necessary too. Without shadow, there is no light. Without trial, there is no triumph. The two were bound forever, each completing the other, each reminding humanity that the cosmos is made of balance. Even now, 5 centuries after conquest, the legend of Quetzalcoatl has not died. In the highlands of Mexico, in the ruins of pyramids and the chants of descendants, his name endures. Artists carve him still, a serpent with feathers, coiled in motion, descending like a shadow of wind down the temple stairs at Chichen Itza when the equinox sun strikes. Every spring and autumn, when the shadow serpent slithers down the steps of the pyramid, thousands gather to witness. And in that moment, it is as though Quetzalcoatl himself has returned, reminding the world that myths do not end. They live, breathe, and return with every telling. At dawn, when Venus blazes bright in the east, the old ones say, "Behold Quetzalcoatl, the morning star. He rises before the sun to guide us. He goes before us into the light." And so the feathered serpent endures, not as a relic of forgotten temples, but as the eternal promise that even when shadows fall, even when shame and ruin strike, there will always be renewal. For Quetzalcoatl is not only the god who gave men life. He is the god who shows that even gods can fall. And yet, like the star at dawn, he always returns. What myths should I uncover next? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more mythic tales that were never meant to be forgotten.